911. Where's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to assist immediately. My wife and child just shot badly.
Okay, you said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Sir?
You said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Yes, sir. 4147 Moselle Road.
Stay on the line with me, okay?
Hurry.
Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay? Okay.
Hello, my name is Nick and this is Crime Doc. In today's video, we are sitting down with good friend and former prosecutor Bill Simons. We will be discussing the Alex Murdaugh murder trial. February the 2nd, 2023, Murdaugh, a powerful South Carolina lawyer, was found guilty of murdering his wife and son. Maggie and Paul were shot near the kennels on their family estate on the 7th of June, 2021. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before convicting Murdaugh, 54, of 2 counts of murder at the end of a 6-week trial. He faces 30 years to life in prison without parole for each murder charge. South Carolina's top prosecutor, Attorney General Alan Wilson, said, quote, "Today's verdict proves that no one, no matter who you are in society, is above the law." Bill, let's do this. Bill, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. You have a wealth of experience in this field. Before we dive into the case, into the trial, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work experience.
I graduated the University of Minnesota Law School in 1974. I passed the bar examination that summer, and I joined a small rural law firm in the fall after I was admitted to practice. And coincidentally, this is very similar to Alex Murdaugh's situation, who was also a part-time prosecutor and had a private practice. During the years that I was in Jackson County, coincidentally also, one of the first big cases that we tried was in 1976, so I was less than 2 years out of law school. We tried the first murder case in Jackson County in probably at least 50 years. We found a body in the fall of 1975, and here we were, this small practice of part-time county attorneys. My partner and I tried the case to a conviction. I continued in that role and was also the elected county attorney in 1982 and 1986 before moving to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, where I was in private practice, and then later the last 8 years of my career, I was in the Scott County Attorney's Office, which is suburban Minneapolis, a much bigger county than I had practiced out in the country, where I prosecuted a significant number of felony cases over that period of time.
And you managed to keep yourself, unlike Mr. Murdaugh, out of trouble during that whole time.
I did. In fact, I am really embarrassed about Alex Murdaugh. Here is a lawyer who came out from a long time established family law firm, tried personal injury cases for years, made all kinds of money, but for whatever reason needed more, and stole money from clients' settlements, stole money from his law firm. I just am dumbfounded by it. And all of that he's admitted to. His family, his great-grandfather started this law firm in 1910. In 1920, the grandfather was elected as the circuit solicitor for 5 counties in the area, which would be similar to my experience in that it was a part-time. They also tried personal injury cases, had a private practice. His grandfather, after passing the bar examination, joined the family law firm and became an assistant and then ultimately the elected solicitor.
And is it common for it to go down from generation to generation like that? Does that happen often?
That's pretty unusual. There is a county in Minnesota where the son succeeded the father as the county attorney, and it was one of the counties in the metropolitan area. But it's not that often that it happens.
Yeah. So, very well-known family in South Carolina. Can you just, for those who've been on a desert island for the last few months, just give us a quick summary of what he has been charged with and what last night he was found actually guilty of?
Alex Murdaugh was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and counts of firearm violations, essentially using a firearm in the commission of the 2 murder charges. Prior to that, Alex Murdaugh had already been charged with 80 or 90 some counts of financial crimes for stealing money from his clients and stealing money from his law firm. And when all of that came to light, he had resigned as a partner in the law firm. He was disbarred by the South Carolina bar and ultimately was charged with the murder cases.
Even prior to this trial, his son was involved in a separate case to do with a boating accident.
His son took the family boat out with a bunch of friends. Apparently they were drinking heavily and they had an accident, and one of the friends on the boat was killed. As a result of that, the son and the father, as the owner of the boat, were sued, and I'm not sure if that case is concluded with a settlement or judgment, but it appears that there's going to be significant financial responsibility because of that.
In a separate incident, we'll play the 911 call for you. He claimed someone had actually shot at him, which turned out not to be the case.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
On Salcahatchee Road.
Okay, what's the address on Salcahatchee Road?
I'm by the church.
What church here? What church are you talking about?
I don't know the name of it with the red roof.
Okay, what's going on?
I got a flat tire, and I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me, and when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me.
Oh, okay. Were you shot?
Yes, but I mean, I'm okay.
You shot where? Where were you shot at?
Huh?
Did they actually shoot you or they tried to shoot you?
They shot me, but...
okay, you need EMS?
Well, I mean, yes, I can't drive.
Okay.
I'm seeing and I'm bleeding a lot.
Where part of your body?
I'm not sure. Somewhere on my head.
He claimed that someone had attempted to kill him. He was out changing a tire. It turned out that he had hired someone who apparently he'd been buying drugs from or helped him acquire drugs over a period of years to shoot him, and either the shooter backed out from killing or Murdaugh changed his mind because it was just a grazing wound to the head. It was not a fatal shot. I don't know what the point of that was unless he truly was attempting to commit an assisted suicide to get out from under all of the problems that he had.
I think I read there was if he had been killed, there would have been some money going to his son, Buster.
I think that's right. Apparently, it was the law in South Carolina, as it was in, I think, most states in the country, that if you committed suicide or an assisted suicide, you would not be allowed to collect the life insurance proceeds. But I think as we've looked at this as more of a mental health issue, it's not necessarily the case anymore. And if he had been killed, that money could have gone to his son as his survivor.
Let's say you're lead prosecutor on this case. How are you going to approach the case, and what areas are you going to go after to get your conviction?
I think in looking at this case and the prosecution's closing argument, I think the prosecution did as good a job as they could, given the problems that they had in prosecuting this case. It was amazing to me how poorly this case was investigated. And I think if the cell phone with the video and the timeline that they were able to create had not been recovered, I'm not so sure this case would have ever been prosecuted or charged against him, much less convicted.
Yeah. So the whole case really turned on this video that came to light. Alex's son Paul had made really just before the murder took place.
Get back! Get back! Quick, Cash. Quit. It's okay. Come here. Oh, boy. Come here, Cash. Shit. Come here. Post it. Get it.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth.
Hey, Bubba.
That's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit.
That's right. Alex Murdaugh said he was not at the dog kennels until after he came back to the home and the dog kennels and found his wife and his son dead. He never changed that story until the video came out, which put him there at or shortly before the shootings. Yeah. In addition to that, I think when the local deputy arrived after Alex Murdaugh made the 911 call and the sheriff came and other local officers, they pretty quickly concluded, maybe because of the relationship with the Murdaugh family and the potential conflict, or because they just thought this was too overwhelming for them, they contacted SLED, the State Law Enforcement Division, to send agents to come in and assist and take the lead on the case.
And did they try and secure the crime scene themselves at all, or?
That was the problem. They didn't secure the crime scene. When family and friends came to console Alex, they walked through the whole crime scene area. They were not stopped from going into that area. They covered the two bodies with a sheet, not a tarp, and it rained. The sheet absorbed water, and if there was hair or DNA on the bodies that might have helped them find out who had committed the crime, that was all lost.
Gone, yeah.
It turned out later they had found other tire prints, but impressions were never made to follow up to see if there might have been someone else there. There were footprints in the area. They never took footprint impressions. They never found any fingerprints, hair. They did find some hair apparently on Maggie, but they never analyzed it.
Wow.
So we don't know whether that could have led them in some direction. They sent the family and friends up to the house while they were going through the crime scene. They didn't go to the house and search the house to find out if there might have been weapons that were involved, if there might have been clothing that could help them in the investigation, or even if there might have been a suspect hiding in the house. They didn't do any of that. And it took the SLED agents, I believe it was several hours, for them to arrive at the scene and start their investigation, because they had to come from all over the state.
Yeah, I mean, from every TV show, movie I've watched, the first thing the officers do is they get out the tape and they try and make some kind of perimeter to conserve any evidence that could be left at the scene.
That's absolutely right, and it's what should have been done here. And I don't know if it wasn't done because the local police and the SLED, when they arrived, were giving some deference to the Murdaugh family. I mean, Alex Murdaugh had been an assistant solicitor trying felony cases, so he had a lot of experience with law enforcement officers.
He knew some of them quite well.
Oh, sure. And his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather were all solicitors, the chief prosecutors for this 5-county area.
Do you think the fact that the trial was held where it was, is that a normal procedure? Could it have been moved anywhere? Thinking maybe it could be in his advantage to be at home like that?
The case would ordinarily be tried in the county where the crime was committed. Someone, either side, the state or the defense, could have asked for a change of venue, but no one did. And I think in this case it cut both ways. There were a lot of people who probably were deferential to the Murdaugh family because of their prominence in the community. But as news came out about all of this, I think there were a lot of people who concluded that he was guilty, and it would have cut against the defense. So it could have cut either way.
So let's listen to the 911 call that Alex Murdaugh put into the police when he discovered the bodies.
911, where's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police and the ambulance immediately. My wife and child just got badly.
Okay, you said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Yes, sir. 4147 Roselle Road.
Stay on the line with me,
Please
okay?
hurry.
Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay? Okay.
Collin County Communications.
Carlton, I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line, caller from 4147 Moselle Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennels.
Okay, and did you see anyone? Okay, is he breathing at all?
No. No.
Is she? Okay, do you see anything? Do you see anyone in the area?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay, and did you hear anything, or did you come home and find them?
No, ma'am. I've been gone. I just came back.
What do you think, Bill? Does that sound like a guy who's just found his wife and his son dead, or can you sense any kind of fakeness to what he's saying? Or
He sounds distraught to me. Whether that was authentic or whether he was putting that on, given his history of lying,
yeah, we know
it's very possible
yeah.
it was to help build a defense, an alibi. But there's no way of knowing. I don't think we can read anything in from the 911 call.
And so on the side of the prosecution, he was in a huge amount of financial trouble, and the main motive that they've come up with for him committing this crime was the fact that he was in so much financial trouble that he was pretty much willing to do anything to get himself out of it.
That was what the prosecution labeled as the motive. You don't have to have motive in order to convict. You have to be able to prove all of the elements of the offense. That is, that he killed someone and he did it maliciously and intentionally.
Yeah.
But you don't have to prove motive. But juries like motive. They like to be able to understand in their minds why a person would do this. Now, to me, it never made any sense. Given the huge problems he had created himself with all these financial crimes, I couldn't understand how distracting from that was somehow going to help him. If he had committed suicide because of the pressure, that would make sense. But as the defense argued, what does he gain by killing his wife and his son?
Yeah.
If he is never charged with the crimes, I don't see how that benefits him in the financial crimes. And if he is found guilty of the crimes, that certainly is not going to return the family legacy.
Yeah.
And I did not see that there was any evidence that there was life insurance that could benefit him. Of course, if he was found guilty of killing them, he wouldn't be able to collect the life insurance. But I didn't find any evidence that there was any life insurance available.
Yeah. So it's possible that he killed them and then the plan was maybe to take his own life and he just couldn't go through with it?
That's possible. There's no evidence of that, but that would be the only thing that might make some sense to me, that somehow he would end all of his problems by killing himself.
Yeah. And we haven't spoken about the murder weapon, so there was two different guns used.
There was a rifle and a shotgun, and the state took the position that he used both of them. The two weapons were never found. They were never able to do any analysis from the shell casings because they didn't have the weapon.
Did they check his... I'm guessing he has the whole room with a bunch of guns in it. Did they actually go through his weapons? And
they did go through the weapons, and he had a rifle or rifles that were consistent or similar to the rifle that was used in the killing.
It's quite a common rifle, I imagine.
I assume so. I'm not a hunter or an expert. And the shotgun was similar. But again, like I say, you can't take the shell casings and analyze the tool markings that were made when the gun is fired in order to determine whether this was the weapon that was used. If you don't have the weapon.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. So if he had used one of his own weapons and put it back in his gun cabinet, would it still be warm?
I don't know whether it would have been warm or not, but at least they could have examined the weapons that were there to determine was one of these the murder weapon.
Yeah.
But they never did. They never did find the weapons that were used to commit the crime. The prosecutor took the position that he used the family guns because they were consistent with the type of guns that the family had. And as the defense pointed out, that's speculation. That's not evidence.
Yeah. And are they suggesting that he used two different guns to try and throw off any investigation suggesting that it was him?
The defense took the position that there must have been two killers because apparently the evidence showed that Paul was shot first. He was shot with the shotgun, a blast to the chest. And according to the medical evidence that was presented, in virtually every case that would have been instant death.
Yeah.
But he didn't die right away. He had to be shot a second time where he was either shot in the shoulder and then it went up into his skull and blew off the top of his head and severed his brain, which was found by his feet, or according to the defense, he was shot in the back of the head, which blew his brains out, but that would have resulted in splitting his face.
Yeah.
And the face was intact. But the defense took the position that there had to be two people with the two guns because assuming Alex did it, and he had the rifle sitting right in the spot that he would need to reach for it in order to quickly kill two different people.
Yeah.
And then he shot Paul with a shotgun in the chest, and then he put the shotgun down to grab the rifle to shoot Maggie and realized Paul wasn't dead, so he puts the rifle back down, grabs the shotgun, shoots Paul again, and in the meantime, Maggie's just standing there. Jeez. And so he shoots her twice.
So I'm guessing she runs towards her son to try and help, but...
That's what the prosecution was arguing, that she was running to her baby.
So like you said, he was found guilty based purely on circumstantial evidence. Is that quite common? That's the way it goes?
It's not at all unusual. Circumstantial evidence is as good as direct evidence. But in order to be as good, all of the circumstances have to be consistent with each other, and they all have to lead conclusively to guilt. In this case, there was no eyewitness. There was no firearm testimony that would be helpful because they didn't find the gun. There were no bloody clothes. There was nothing else. What there was Paul's video.
Yeah.
And if Paul had not had his cell phone and had not been videoing, I wonder if this case would ever have been charged against Alex, much less convicted.
Yeah.
And I think on rebuttal, I think the defense made a very good argument, pointing out that the two eyewitnesses are dead. But Paul's phone recorded what happened immediately before, and if you accept that when the phone went off, it was only a matter of minutes. And the phone gave the audio, which showed that Alex was present at that time. Not that he didn't show up until after he found the bodies. That put Alex at the scene. And as the defense said, from the grave, Paul's video testified against his father.
That's it. And he put it down to his addiction to opioids, the fact that he was paranoid, and that's why he lied, not just in court, but also to his family.
He said it often left him confused.
Yeah.
Now, it wouldn't be a defense to the crime because he voluntarily took the drugs, but it could be used and was attempted to be used as an explanation for all of the lies that he did, that he was confused, he was fuzzy, he was muddled because of the drugs.
Yeah, it could definitely play with the jury's mind. Is this the reason why he lied, and has changed his behavior completely as he's become more and more dependent on the drugs?
Sure.
And so would you say, just talking about circumstantial evidence in the cases that you tried, how often was it the circumstantial evidence, not an exact figure obviously, but as a percentage, that would solve it?
I don't know that I can answer that. I think in a lot of the cases there was both circumstantial evidence and direct evidence.
Yeah.
And so that makes it a lot easier. Whereas in this case, it was strictly, I don't know that I ever prosecuted a case that I can recall, that was strictly based on circumstantial evidence. And ultimately, in this case, the jury took all of that circumstantial evidence and came to the conclusion that only Alex could have done it.
Yeah.
So he's guilty.
And if you had to be critical of the way the prosecution approached this, is there anything you think they could have done better to put forward their case?
I think, given the problems with the investigation, the prosecutors did as good as they could do. They had a lot to overcome. That said, I thought as I watched the prosecution's closing argument that they spent way too much time talking about the financial crimes and the lying. By the time we got to closing arguments, I don't think there was any way that jury believed that Alex Murdaugh wasn't a liar. I think that had been proven in spades.
Yeah.
But he went on, I think, for about an hour. And I thought it ran the risk of suggesting to the jurors that why is he spending so much time talking about this? Is it because he's so weak on the actual evidence leading or showing the murder?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
is he trying to convince the jury that this is a really bad person? Even though the judge is going to instruct the jury that you can't use the evidence of the financial crimes as direct evidence of the murder, but you could use it to show motive.
What could he have spent more time on if he'd kind of spoken a bit less about the financial situation?
I think he could have spent a lot less time. I thought his closing argument was very methodical in showing the timeline.
Yeah.
And if you believe the timeline, Alex Murdaugh is guilty.
Exactly.
I just think that overall, he was redundant. It's helpful to repeat to drive the point home, but he just belabored it. I kept thinking, you are killing a dead horse.
Yeah.
And he just went on and on forever.
Yeah. I guess in his mind, this is all I've got really as this is my main reasoning going forward. So I'm just going to keep going with this.
I can understand that. I remember one case that I was trying, which did result in a conviction, but thinking to myself, I've got to keep talking because if I quit, they're going to find him not guilty. So
it worked.
I think it ran the risk. A prosecutor's obligation is not to get a conviction. It's to do justice. And I just think he ran the risk of making it appear that he was going to any means necessary to get a conviction. I often used to tell jurors in my closing argument, talking about reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And explaining it to them and talking about, as the defense lawyer pointed out, if you have a hesitation, if you don't have a strong conviction that this is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, I would say if you don't reach that point, then you should find the defendant not guilty. But if you are satisfied, and I submit to you based on the evidence here, and I'd go talk about the evidence, it leads to one conclusion only, and that's guilty.
Yeah. I'm guessing you have to, when you're in that situation, you remind the jury that that's what they're there to do. So leave any personal position, anything you've heard in the press, you got to kind of keep that out of your mind. And then your job is to focus them on why they're there.
That's absolutely right. As a prosecutor, you want the jury to focus on the evidence as it comes in at the trial and the instructions on the law as given to them by the judge, and not be thinking about anything outside of those parameters.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a perfect world that we live in, and obviously people bring with them a certain baggage. But I always thought as a prosecutor it was important to come across as being fair and arguing the facts and the law, and not coming out as being overly attempting to get a conviction by whatever means are necessary.
Do you think the personality of the lawyer themselves can have any impact if it's a likable character?
Absolutely it can. I am firmly convinced that in most cases, jurors start to identify with the lawyer.
Yeah.
And if they like the lawyer and believe the lawyer is credible and is telling them the truth, it's more likely they're going to find for that lawyer on that site.
We spoke briefly about the video. When did that become public knowledge that had been found?
I don't know exactly when it was, but it was some months after the killings.
But it was before the trial started.
Oh, yeah. It was sometime before that. It took them a long time in order to find the password, to break the code, so that they could open the phone. I am thinking that it was 7, 8, 9 months or more, because I think it was about a year after the killings that the indictment came down.
You would think with all the technology at our disposal, the things that we're able to hack into, that they would be able to get into a young boy's phone a little bit quicker than that.
No, I agree.
I think I remember reading that it was Alex's brother that found Maggie's phone.
I don't know that it was Alex's brother that found it, but they found it in a field in between the Alex Murdaugh home and Alex Murdaugh's mother's home. And
so how did that get there?
Well, the state took the position that Alex Murdaugh must have taken the phone with him after he killed mom and son, or mother and wife and son, and that he threw it out into the field, that he slowed down. Well, he slowed down, according to the evidence that they found from the Suburban that he was driving, from 45 to 42, and then sped back up to 44. I thought the defense made a good point here, because apparently the prosecution went to General Motors and they asked them to give them information from the data that would have been recorded from the automobile. Whether they gave them an incorrect serial number, they missed a number, whatever, they couldn't find it. This went on for months. And finally, someone apparently from the public contacted General Motors in some way and said, why can't you help them? And so they looked into it further, and ultimately they were able to retrieve data.
Okay.
But the problem was, and defense argued, Alex kept saying, find the automobile, the Suburban data, because it will show that the only phone in the car was mine, that I didn't have Maggie's cell phone in the vehicle with me. The data was still there, but the memory was lost because of the delay. It overrides. And so as a result of that, they didn't have any information which would help them determine, yes, the phone was in the car, or no, it was not.
Could you say that maybe the defense didn't do a good enough job in coming up with another scenario that didn't end up with it being Alex Murdaugh that killed his family?
I think the defense really did a good job. I was much more impressed with the defense closing argument than I was with the prosecutor's closing argument. For one thing, the defense lawyer seemed more likable, and I think he was a more interesting speaker. I think he raised the points that he could raise. He talked about the investigation and all the problems that led up to it, and he didn't attack the prosecutors. He said, I know these prosecutors, they're good lawyers, but they can only work with the evidence that is given to them. He talked a little bit about the financial crimes and the lies and acknowledging them, but he moved right into the case itself. I thought he did a good job of trying to make a case to not trust the timeline that the prosecution was setting out. That every time you put the phone down, it basically shuts down and it doesn't show activity again until you pick it up or you do something with it. So he was extending the timeline from the information that he had. He pointed out the fact that it took them so long to get the information from General Motors on the Suburban that he said, we'll never know whether Maggie's cell phone was in the Suburban with Alex when he was driving back or not.
Yeah.
I thought he did a real nice job on the two-shooter theory that they were arguing.
You mentioned tire tracks as well.
Sure. In the beginning, when the officers arrived at the scene and SLED arrived, they didn't do tire impressions to see whether there might have been another vehicle involved or evidence of. They didn't do foot imprints to see if they could determine what was the person who was there and did the shooting. Does it fit with Alex, or would it show someone else? He brought out all of that. And he talked about the fact that they never recovered any of the guns.
Yeah.
They never found any of the clothing. And in fact, they actually lied to the grand jury, telling them that the white t-shirt that Alex was wearing showed evidence of blood and other matter on it, which was not true. The first test that they performed only showed the possibility of blood. When the second test was done and the investigator had the results of the second test, which showed no blood, but still testified, to me, that's worse than a poor investigation. When you catch the police, it really creates distrust.
Yeah.
But apparently the evidence of the cell phone timeline was so powerful in the minds of the jury that they just couldn't overcome that.
Yeah. So there's two things there. You would think that given the high-profile nature of the crime that they would have been extra careful to do things well, but it looks like the opposite took place.
I would agree with that. And it may be that because Alex Murdaugh and the Murdaugh family was held in such high esteem in the area that they were more deferential than they should have been.
Yeah, maybe they were worried about stepping on their toes and not following procedures through like they should have.
But to me, that would seem to indicate that you would go overboard to make sure that you were doing everything possible so that if the evidence came out showing it was Alex, or if they found evidence of someone else, but they just ultimately, as the defense pointed out, they focused in on Alex and they just either quit looking because they'd already concluded he was guilty, or because of all the evidence that was lost because of the way the investigation was conducted.
And of course, the time of death is based pretty much solely on the cell phone usage.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. They had no other information which could in any way conclusively determine that.
Yeah. $1 million question, Bill. Do you think he did it?
I think, now again, I didn't watch all of the evidence as it came in.
Don't give me a lawyer's answer.
No, I understand. I watched the closing arguments. I believe that Alex Murdaugh was probably guilty. I think the defense did a great job, given the poor investigation and the other issues that came up, in trying to point to reasonable doubt.
Yeah, they did as well as they could with what they had.
Exactly. But I think the cell phone evidence was just so overwhelming. That really ended the discussion. It's so hard to say because when you're arguing the case from your position, whether it's prosecution or defense, you believe so strongly in it. But as an old trial lawyer said many years ago, the facts are what the jury says they are. And I think there are cases where the best lawyer loses because the jury just doesn't believe the facts that lawyer is trying to present, or believes that the other lawyer, even though that other lawyer isn't as skilled. Was justice done? I think probably. When I look at the financial crimes that Alex Murdaugh committed, as a lawyer, I am truly embarrassed by what he did. A lawyer owes an obligation, a fiduciary duty, to do the best he or she can do for their client. And to steal money from a client like that, I just think is unfathomable. I can't believe it. So I have to say he's going to get punishment that he deserves.
Sentence hasn't come down yet, I don't think.
No, do it differently in every state. My understanding is they were not seeking the death penalty. So I guess from what I have read, and South Carolina is different than Minnesota, the question is, will it be 30 years to life or life without parole? Now, if it's 30 years to life, my sense is that effectively, if 30 is the minimum under South Carolina law, that's effectively life without parole. Yeah. Because the two murders, I'm sure, will be sentenced consecutively. That means you serve the first one for 30 years and then you get another 30 years, whereas the firearm charges would be served concurrently, meaning at the same time.
Okay.
So they'll go away during the time that he serves for the murders.
All right, Mr. Murdaugh, I sentence you to the State Department of Corrections on each of the murder indictments in the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh. I sentence you for the term of the rest of your natural life for the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably love so much. I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life. Those sentences will run consecutive.
You have to feel for so there's one remaining son, is that correct?
Yeah, Buster.
Yeah, you got to feel for Buster. I mean, his brother and his mum are gone, and his father essentially gone as well when he goes to prison.
Absolutely. And I get the sense from what I've read that Buster believes his father did not do it.
Okay.
And my guess is it's probably unfathomable for him to believe that his father could have done this to his mother and his brother.
Instinct.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow. If only dogs could talk, they could.
There you go.
I could solve this in a second. All right, Bill, I think we've covered it pretty well there. Let us know in the comments below if you think he was guilty or not. That's the main question. He's been sentenced now. If you enjoyed this type of content as well, please leave us a comment and we can do more for you in the future. Until next time, stay safe and look after yourselves.